5 days after surgeons rebuilt my spine, I was finally starting to believe the worst was behind me. Every movement still felt like someone had replaced my backbone with rusty metal, but at least I was home. The doctors had been crystal clear. Absolutely no lifting, no bending, no housework, and as much rest as possible. My only job was to heal. My husband, Daniel, had smiled, squeezed my hand, and promised he would handle everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe enough to trust him. That illusion lasted exactly 48 hours. He walked into the bedroom with the same grin he wore whenever he thought he'd done something clever. "I've got great news," he announced. Whenever someone starts a sentence with "great news," it usually isn't. "My family wanted to come support us." I smiled weakly. "Your parents?" "Well, not exactly." I raised an eyebrow. "My parents, my brother and his wife, my sister, her husband, their 3 kids, Uncle Rick, Aunt Linda, Grandma June, and my cousin Tyler." I blinked. 12 people? They'll only stay a few days. Only. As though 12 adults and children magically became invisible if they stayed less than a week. I reminded him that I couldn't even stand long enough to brush my teeth without needing to sit down. "They won't expect anything," he said confidently. "Their family." Those 4 words should have come with a warning label. Saturday afternoon arrived, and I heard the invasion before I saw it. SUV doors slammed. Children screamed with excitement. Someone blasted country music from a portable speaker. Coolers rolled across my driveway. Luggage piled onto my front porch. By the time Daniel opened the front door, it looked less like relatives visiting and more like a traveling circus claiming new territory. Nobody asked how my surgery had gone. Nobody asked if I needed anything. Instead, I heard questions floating upstairs through the open bedroom door. "Where should we put the burgers? Who's making dinner? Hope there's enough beer. I call the biggest bedroom." One of my nephews sprinted down the hallway wearing muddy shoes while another bounced a basketball against my living room wall. I slowly lowered myself into the recliner beside the bedroom window, trying not to twist my back. My stitches throbbed with every burst of laughter echoing through the house. Outside, my flower beds became a racetrack for children. The backyard filled with folding tables, camping chairs, coolers, and enough food to feed a small army. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, laughing proudly like he'd organized the neighborhood festival of the year. Meanwhile, I couldn't even carry my own glass of water downstairs. I wasn't angry because they had visited. I was angry because nobody seemed to remember there was a recovering patient inside the house. Across the street, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Parker, paused while watering her roses. She looked toward my crowded driveway. Then toward my bedroom window. Our eyes met. She gave me one slow nod. Not a cheerful wave. Not a smile. Just the kind of nod that said she'd already figured out exactly what was happening. A few minutes later, another neighbor walking his golden retriever slowed down and stared at the growing backyard party. He frowned, glanced toward my window, then quietly continued down the sidewalk. I had lived on this street for 6 years. Good neighbors notice things. Great neighbors don't wait to be asked. As the music grew louder and someone shouted that the barbecue was ready, I leaned back carefully against my pillow and sighed. I honestly believed surviving spinal surgery would be the hardest challenge I'd face that week. I had absolutely no idea my neighborhood was already preparing a response that would make 12 unwanted houseguests wish they'd booked a hotel before they ever unpacked a single suitcase. By Sunday morning, our quiet backyard had transformed into something that looked like a county fair with no closing time. Smoke drifted from 2 barbecue grills, country music blasted from oversized speakers, children chased each other through my flower beds, and someone had actually strung decorative lights across my fence without asking. Every burst of laughter made my head pound, and every attempt to roll over in bed reminded me that my spine was still healing. Daniel wandered around flipping burgers like he was hosting the family reunion of the year. Whenever I reminded him that I needed peace and rest, he smiled and whispered, "Just one more day. They're having fun." Fun. Apparently, my recovery had become less important than everyone's vacation. I slowly shuffled onto the front porch with my walker, hoping a little fresh air would distract me. Before I could even sit down, Mrs. Parker crossed the street carrying a small casserole dish. "I made you chicken soup," she said softly. "And don't worry. The neighborhood has noticed." I thanked her, confused by the little smile that spread across her face before she walked away. Exactly 10 minutes later, the comedy began. The Johnson family next door suddenly decided it was the perfect morning to mow their lawn. Not just the front yard, the backyard, the side yard. Then they carefully trimmed every edge with a loud weed trimmer. Just as the mowing stopped, another neighbor fired up the world's most enthusiastic leaf blower. The timing was almost magical. Every time Daniel's cousin tried telling a story around the barbecue, the leaf blower roared to life. When the blower finally stopped, someone across the street started pressure washing their driveway. The machine echoed through the neighborhood like a miniature jet engine. The relatives frowned. They raised their voices. The neighbors somehow became even louder. An hour later, old Mr. Jenkins rolled out a table saw. I had lived on this street for years and had never once seen him build anything. Today, apparently, he had chosen to construct an entire backyard gazebo. Board after board met the saw with perfect comedic timing. Every punchline from my husband's uncle disappeared beneath the whining blade. Every karaoke song became impossible to hear. I buried my face in a pillow to keep from laughing too hard. My doctor had warned me that sudden laughter could strain my healing muscles, but watching 12 entitled guests lose a battle against routine neighborhood chores was worth every careful chuckle. Soon complaints started floating across the yard. "Is it always this noisy around here? I can't hear myself think. Does everyone mow their lawn on the same day?" Mrs. Parker simply watered her roses with the most innocent expression I'd ever seen. Then came the biggest surprise of all. The man who lived on the other side of my house walked over carrying a basket of fresh fruit. His name was Cale. He had moved into the neighborhood about a year earlier and was unbelievably polite. Everyone assumed he worked remotely because he was always home, always smiling, and somehow managed to fix almost anything around the neighborhood. "I heard you were recovering," he said gently. "I thought you could use something healthy." His voice was calm enough to quiet the chaos around me. We talked while I remained seated on the porch, careful not to move too much. Unlike everyone else, he asked how I actually felt. He listened when I explained the surgery, the pain, and the doctor's strict recovery orders. Then he glanced toward the overcrowded backyard and sighed. "I've traveled farther than most people can imagine," he said with a small grin. "And I've learned one thing." I raised an eyebrow. "Humans may argue with each other every day, but the moment someone vulnerable is treated unfairly, good people somehow find each other." I laughed softly. "That's a strangely poetic thing to say." He hesitated before leaning a little closer. "There's another reason I know." His eyes sparkled with an unusual silver glow that disappeared almost instantly. "I'm not exactly from around here." For a second I thought the pain medication was making me hallucinate. Then he smiled. "My home isn't on Earth. I'm part of an interstellar cultural exchange program. Most humans never notice us because we're here to observe, not interfere." I stared at him. Instead of fear, I felt curiosity. Somehow, learning my kind neighbor was an alien explained why he always seemed wiser than everyone else on the block. He looked toward the backyard, where Daniel's relatives were once again trying to start another loud karaoke session. "I've visited dozens of worlds," Cale said quietly. "None of them protect their neighbors quite like humans do." Right on cue, 3 more lawn mowers started simultaneously. The karaoke lasted exactly 12 seconds. I smiled for the first time since coming home from the hospital, realizing the neighborhood's little campaign had only just begun. Monday morning began with my husband's relatives declaring they were going to have one last unforgettable backyard party. Apparently, after 2 straight days of noise, they believed the neighborhood would simply accept another festival in honor of their vacation. They couldn't have been more wrong. By 10 o'clock, folding chairs were arranged across the lawn, Another grill was smoking away, and Daniel's uncle was proudly connecting a giant karaoke machine to portable speakers. I glanced out my bedroom window just in time to see Cale standing beside Mrs. Parker, quietly smiling as they watched the preparations. Something about that smile made me suspicious. 15 minutes later, Uncle Rick proudly grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen." Before he could sing a single note, every sprinkler in our backyard suddenly burst to life. Water shot into the air from every direction. Children squealed. Adults jumped out of their chairs. Paper plates floated across the grass while burger buns sailed through puddles like tiny boats. My sister-in-law shrieked as icy water soaked her brand-new designer shoes. Daniel stared at the sprinkler controls in complete confusion. "I turned these off yesterday." Cale happened to be walking by the sidewalk carrying a toolbox. "What a strange malfunction," he said innocently. I noticed the faintest silver glow flicker beneath the lid of the toolbox before disappearing. Alien technology. Subtle. Very subtle. The family eventually dried off and decided to restart the barbecue. That lasted about 5 minutes. A sudden gust of wind pushed harmless smoke directly toward every occupied chair while the neighboring yards remained perfectly clear. Everyone coughed dramatically. Meanwhile, Mrs. Parker and the Johnson family enjoyed lemonade on their patios without a single puff of smoke reaching them. "How is that even possible?" Aunt Linda complained. "No idea," Mrs. Parker replied with an innocent smile. The comedy kept escalating. The Bluetooth speaker disconnected every few minutes for no apparent reason. Each time Daniel finally reconnected it, another interruption occurred. Sometimes the battery mysteriously drained from 100% to 0. Other times the microphone produced nothing except loud squealing feedback. Uncle Rick finally gave up after his 4th failed country song. Even better, the children's inflatable pool slowly began losing air until it resembled a giant blue pancake. One of the coolers developed a mysterious leak, leaving melted ice spreading across the patio. Someone accidentally stepped into it while carrying a plate of potato salad. The spectacular tumble ended with potato salad decorating Daniel's shirt from shoulder to shoe. I laughed so hard I had to grab the armrest to protect my healing back. Across the fence, Cale looked toward me. "You should be careful," he said gently. "Healing humans aren't supposed to laugh that much." "I'm trying," I replied between chuckles. He walked over carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. Unlike everyone else in the house, he always asked permission before entering the porch. His kindness felt strangely comforting. "You really are helping, aren't you?" I asked quietly. He smiled without answering directly. "My people believe advanced technology should solve impossible problems. And humans? You solve impossible people." That made me laugh again. He leaned against the porch railing and looked toward the backyard. "In every star system I've visited, civilizations admire strength, intelligence, or wealth." He paused. "But humans possess something rarer." "What?" "They unite." I watched Mrs. Parker hand fresh cookies to another neighbor while Mr. Jenkins continued pretending to build his imaginary gazebo. Nobody had organized this. Nobody had been asked. Every single person had simply decided that a woman recovering from surgery deserved peace. Cale noticed me smiling. "That is why Earth fascinates us," he said softly. "One kind person inspires another. Before long, an entire neighborhood becomes unstoppable." For a brief moment, the noise behind us disappeared. It was just the 2 of us enjoying tea on the porch. His calm presence made me forget the pain in my back. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was simply kind. It reminded me how different genuine compassion felt compared to empty promises. Out in the backyard, Daniel was becoming increasingly frustrated. His relatives had stopped laughing. Several were scrolling through hotel websites on their phones. I overheard my sister-in-law whisper, "Maybe we'd actually get some sleep somewhere else." Uncle Rick nodded immediately. Even Grandma June admitted she'd never experienced a neighborhood quite so energetic. By late afternoon, the entire family gathered around the picnic table for what looked like an emergency meeting. Daniel rubbed his forehead while everyone talked over one another. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough to realize something wonderful was happening. For the first time since arriving, all 12 guests were discussing the exact same thing: leaving. The family meeting lasted nearly half an hour. From my bedroom window, I watched 12 exhausted faces take turns complaining about the endless noise. They blamed the lawn mowers, the construction, the sprinklers, the smoke, and even the birds that seemed to chirp louder every morning. Not one of them admitted the obvious. They had turned the home of a recovering patient into a holiday resort. Finally, Daniel climbed the stairs and knocked gently on the bedroom door. "They've decided to check into a hotel," he said quietly. I tried my best to sound disappointed. "Oh? Why?" "They said they need somewhere more peaceful." I couldn't stop smiling. Within an hour, suitcases were rolling back down the driveway. Coolers disappeared into SUVs. The karaoke machine was packed away. Children climbed into their seats without protesting. Even Uncle Rick admitted, "Maybe hotels exist for a reason." As the last vehicle turned the corner and disappeared from sight, something almost magical happened. The neighborhood became completely silent. No lawn mowers. No leaf blowers. No table saw. No pressure washers. Mrs. Parker quietly put away her watering can. Mr. Jenkins closed the garage door on the half-built gazebo that everyone knew had never really needed building. The Johnson family parked their mower and waved at me with satisfied smiles. Their mission had been accomplished. Daniel stood in the middle of the empty backyard looking completely confused. Then, slowly, realization spread across his face. He looked around the neighborhood. Every single neighbor suddenly returned to normal life. That was when he understood. None of the coincidences had been coincidences. He walked back inside and sat beside my chair. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Finally he sighed. "I was wrong." Those 3 words carried more weight than any excuse he could have offered. "I promised to take care of you, and instead I made your recovery harder." His voice cracked with genuine regret. "I kept thinking everyone would have fun. I never stopped to ask what you actually needed." I reached for his hand. "I didn't need a party." "I know. I needed my husband." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." This time, I believed him. The next morning felt like living in a completely different house. Daniel woke up early to make breakfast. He organized my medications exactly the way the nurse had instructed. He cleaned every room, washed every dish, and even apologized to my flower beds before carefully replanting the crushed flowers. When I tried to stand, he gently reminded me to let him carry everything. For the first time since my surgery, I could actually focus on healing. The neighbors continued stopping by throughout the week. Mrs. Parker delivered homemade soup. The Johnson family brought fresh vegetables from their garden. Mr. Jenkins repaired my broken mailbox, insisting he had leftover wood from his imaginary construction project. Then Cale arrived carrying a small toolbox. He quietly fixed a loose porch railing in less than a minute. I never saw him use a single screw, yet somehow everything became sturdier than before. As he packed his tools away, I smiled. "Alien technology?" He winked. "Officially, advanced craftsmanship." We both laughed. During the following days, we spent several afternoons talking on the porch while I recovered. He shared stories about distant planets where cities floated above crystal oceans and forests glowed beneath 3 moons. I told him about family traditions, neighborhood barbecues that were actually invited, and why humans always seemed to gather around food when life became difficult. He listened with genuine fascination. One evening he looked toward the sunset and spoke quietly. "My assignment on Earth is almost over." I felt unexpectedly sad. "I suppose your people are waiting." "They are." He smiled warmly. "But I've learned something important here." "What is it?" "In most civilizations, greatness is measured by technology." He looked toward Mrs. Parker, who was chatting with another neighbor across the street. "On Earth, greatness is measured by kindness." A small shuttle, invisible to everyone except the two of us, shimmered high above the clouds before fading again. "I'll request another assignment," he said with a grin. "A planet with neighbors who fight injustice using lawnmowers is far too interesting to leave forever." I laughed so hard that this time it didn't hurt my back at all. A month later, my doctor announced that my recovery was ahead of schedule. He asked what had changed. I smiled. I finally got the peace I was prescribed. Daniel squeezed my hand, grateful for a second chance. As we drove home, every neighbor waved from their yard. Some heroes wear capes. Mine carried leaf blowers, lawn mowers, casseroles, and enough quiet determination to remind 12 inconsiderate guests that compassion always has the loudest voice. And somewhere among the stars, I like to imagine an alien was telling the rest of the galaxy that if anyone ever underestimated humans, they should first survive an entire neighborhood protecting one recovering woman with nothing more than teamwork, kindness, and perfectly timed yard work.